Why do some emails bruise deeper than any spoken words? The sharp scent of morning coffee lingers in the air, but Margaret Riley's hand shakes as she clutches her mug, eyes stinging at the glowing screen. Silence presses in from the gray Minneapolis dawn outside, measured only by the low hum of the HVAC and the echo of hollow words. Terminated. How does a company forget 5 years in a single line of text? Even the leather chair creaks as if mourning her loss. Margaret's mind races. What does loyalty truly look like, and who answers when dignity is denied? Clear your desk by the end of the day, Margaret. Personnel department will handle the exit paperwork. The words on her computer screen blurred as she read them again. After 5 years of dedicated service to AmeriCorps distribution, all she got was a cold, impersonal email. 3 days. That's all she had taken to bury her father. 3 days of approved bereavement leave. We need people who prioritize their work, the email continued, as if attending her father's funeral was an optional social event she had chosen over filing quarterly reports. Margaret sat back in her chair, the leather squeaking in the silence of the early morning. The community center was still mostly empty, the sky outside just beginning to brighten with dawn. She had come in early, eager to catch up on work after her brief absence. Until 2 minutes ago, she was the district operations manager of the highest-performing division at AmeriCorps. At 34, she had built not just a career, but a team that felt like family. They celebrated birthdays together, supported each other through difficult times, and pushed one another to excel professionally. She looked around at her workspace, the small cactus her team had gifted her last Christmas, the framed photo of them all at the company retreat, the handwritten thank you notes from team members she had mentored. 5 years of her life condensed into a few personal items that would fit in a cardboard box. The termination notice attached to the email was signed by Charles Brennan, her executive director, who had personally approved her bereavement leave just last week. Failure to maintain adequate presence during critical operational periods, it read. Her father's death apparently fell during one of these undefined critical periods. Margaret didn't cry. She didn't slam her fist on the desk or storm into Charles's community center demanding an explanation. Instead, she pulled out her phone, took a photograph of the email, and forwarded it to her personal account. In that moment, she knew this wasn't just about a job. It was about justice, dignity, and the fight to preserve her self-respect. The battle had just begun. I shut down my computer, my fingers trembling as I started packing up my desk. It felt like the walls of the community center were closing in, the fluorescent lights buzzing above me. By the time my colleagues trickled in, half my belongings were already in a cardboard box. Tanya from accounting was the first to notice, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Holly, what's happening?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a breath, fighting the wave of emotions. "I've been let go," I said simply. "What? Why?" Apparently, taking approved bereavement leave to bury my father wasn't showing proper priority for my work. Confusion flickered on Tanya's face, quickly morphing into outrage. "That's not right. Have you talked to Paula? The regional manager should know about this." "No," I replied, wrapping my little cactus in newspaper, trying to feel its prickly resilience in my fingertips. I'm not going to fight it, but I won't forget it either. As I continued packing, more co-workers arrived. Jason was the first of my direct reports to hear the news. His cheerful grin vanished, replaced by concern. "This is bull," he started, frustration rising in his voice. I cut him off with a small shake of my head. "It's done, Jason. Dan made his decision. But we just finished the Newbrook merger last month. Profits are up 18% this quarter because of your planning." I smiled sadly. Apparently, that wasn't enough. By 9:30, all 7 of my core team members were gathered around me in silent solidarity. Ethan, our logistics specialist, looked like he might punch a wall. Veronica, our client relations manager, had tears streaming down her face. Michael, Louise, Diane, Gabriella, and Kayla stood behind them, each face a mix of disbelief and fury. "You can't leave," Veronica insisted, her voice trembling. "The Wilson account renewal is next week. The Hernandez shipping contract is in negotiations. None of us knows the system like you do." I finished taping up my box. Dan should have thought of that before firing me for attending my father's funeral. The weight of my words hung heavy in the air. My father had been gone just a week, the soil from his grave still fresh. What would it take for them to see the injustice? The ache of a loss mixed with the sting of betrayal squeezed my heart tightly. Would this truly be the end, or would it ignite a fight for dignity that no one could ignore? And now, this betrayal from a company I had poured my soul into. "I need everyone back at their desks," came a sharp voice from behind us. Charles Brennan stood there, arms crossed, his thin face set in a disapproving frown. "We have deadlines to meet. No one move now," he added, his voice rising slightly. After a long moment, my team dispersed, each giving me a meaningful look as they returned to their workstations. Dan approached me, lowering his voice. "This could have been handled with more discretion if you'd waited until the end of the day to pack up." I met his gaze steadily, like the discretion you showed in firing me via email after approving my bereavement leave. His jaw tightened. "Business needs change rapidly. Summit Edge needs people who understand that priorities shift. Your father's passing was unfortunate, but don't," I warned, my voice deadly quiet. "Don't finish that sentence, Dan." For a moment, something like uncertainty flickered across his face. Then he straightened, adjusting his tie. "Personnel department is expecting you. Please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." I picked up my box. "Don't worry, I won't make a scene. But remember this moment, Dan. You might find it important later." The Human Resources Community Center was clinical. White walls, minimal decoration, and Barbara Kent's sympathetic but practiced expression. She was new to the company, having joined just 6 months ago, and I could see she was uncomfortable with the situation. "I'm sorry about this, Holly," she said, sliding separation papers across her desk. "And I'm very sorry about your father." "Thank you," I replied, scanning the documents. Standard severance, 2 weeks' pay, a non-disparagement clause, a reminder of my non-compete agreement which prohibited me from working for direct competitors for 6 months. "Is there anything I should know about why this happened?" Barbara asked cautiously. "This seems abrupt." I debated how much to share, then decided on the truth. I pulled out my phone and showed her the email. 3 days of approved bereavement leave, and I'm fired for not prioritizing work. Barbara's professional demeanor slipped, her eyes widening. "This is the actual termination notice. Just an email. No performance improvement plan, no documented warnings. No, nothing." She frowned, making a note on her legal pad. "I need to verify some things with the legal department. Would you excuse me for a moment?" While Barbara stepped out, I gazed through the window. From this floor, I could see the Minneapolis River winding through the city. My father had loved fishing that river. He taught me patience there, standing in waders as the current rushed past our knees. "The river moves, Holly girl," he'd say, "but the rocks stay steady. Be like the rocks." Barbara returned 20 minutes later, her expression carefully neutral, but her tight smile told me everything. Nothing would change. "Unfortunately, Idaho is an at-will employment state," she began. "The company is within its rights to—" "I understand," I interrupted, signing the documents without further argument. "Summit Edge can do whatever it wants, just like I can." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Off the record. This isn't right. If you wanted to pursue action, I don't," I said firmly. "But thank you." As I walked through the main community center toward the exit, I felt eyes following me. My team watched silently, their faces somber. I gave them a small smile, my last act as their leader. Outside, the September air was surprisingly warm. I placed my box in the trunk of my car and sat in the driver's seat, allowing myself a moment to process everything. My phone chimed with a text message, then another and another. "Jason, this is wrong. What can we do? Veronica, are you okay? Can we meet up later? Ethan, Dan's a spineless jerk. The team is furious." More messages poured in, expressions of outrage, support, loyalty. These people weren't just colleagues, they were my professional family. I started my car, the engine rumbling like thunder. A plan began to form in my mind, sharp and clear. I wouldn't confront Summit Edge head-on. I wouldn't resort to a lawsuit, even though I had solid grounds. No, I decided to play it smart, biding my time like Dad had taught me. The rocks stay steady while the river rushes past. My phone buzzed, jolting me out of my thoughts. It was Hank Fleming, CEO of Vertex Transport Systems, Summit Edge's biggest competitor. We'd met at an industry conference last year, and he'd been trying to recruit me for months. I was ready to return his call. As I walked into the Vertex Community Center, the atmosphere was a breath of fresh air. Open spaces, vibrant colors, and large windows offering views of the Minneapolis skyline. Hank greeted me with a warm, hearty handshake, his silver beard framing an expression of genuine concern. "I've been hoping you'd call," he said, ushering me to a sleek conference room. Though I admit I didn't expect it would be under these circumstances. Word travels fast in our industry, especially when it involves something as shocking as my termination. I filled him in as we settled in, pulling up Dan's email on my phone. "That's not just bad management," Hank said, frowning as he read it. "That's inhumane. Bereavement leave exists for a reason." "Summit Edge has always prioritized profits over people," I replied, my voice steady yet tinged with disbelief. "I just never thought I'd be on the receiving end." Hank leaned in closer, sincerity etched on his face. "I'll be blunt, Holly. I want you on my team. Vertex is expanding our Pacific Northwest operations, and we need someone with your expertise. The division director position is yours if you want it." A wave of excitement washed over me. Division director, a significant jump from my role at Summit Edge. My heart raced at the thought of more responsibility, more authority, better pay. "What about my non-compete?" I asked, trying to temper my enthusiasm. Hank leaned back, confidence radiating from him. "Our legal team has reviewed it. It's overly broad and likely unenforceable. Plus, we'd cover any legal expenses if Summit Edge tried to challenge it." "I'd need to think about it," I said, my mind swirling with possibilities. "Of course," Hank replied with an encouraging smile. "Take the weekend. We can talk specifics on Monday." Turning to leave, I felt a flicker of hope spark within me, igniting a relentless determination to move forward. Would I choose to reclaim my dignity and values? The answer felt clear. The river wouldn't sweep me away this time. Like the rocks, I'd stay steady. That evening, I met Veronica and Jason at Riverfront Brewing, a cozy pub tucked away from the bustling downtown. The air was thick with the scent of hops and the soft murmur of conversations. As they slid into the booth, their faces were etched with a mix of anger and concern. "How are you holding up?" Veronica asked, her voice gentle yet probing. "I'm all right," I replied, forcing a smile. It had been a tough couple of weeks, but I was determined to land on my feet. Jason snorted, shaking his head. "Dan's a fool. The community center is in chaos already. Nobody knows where the Henderson proposal files are stored, and your system access hasn't been transferred to anyone else." "That sounds like a Dan problem," I said, taking a sip of my water, the coolness refreshing against the heat of the moment. Veronica leaned in, her eyes serious. "It's more than that. Everyone's talking, not just our team. People are furious about how you were treated. I didn't expect that, really. You were respected, Holly." Jason nodded. "Not just by us. The way Dan handled this. People are scared now. If they do this to you, their star team lead, what would they do to anyone else?" "Good," I said simply, feeling a flicker of defiance. As we talked, my phone buzzed with texts from other team members. Each message echoed similar stories of disorganization, frustration, and anger at management. Summit Edge was feeling my absence already. "What will you do now?" Jason asked, his brow furrowed. I hesitated, the weight of my decision heavy in the air. "I've had an offer from Vertex." Their eyes widened in surprise. "But my non-compete—" "Those aren't always enforceable," Veronica interjected quickly. She worked with contracts daily and understood the legalities, especially if they fired me without cause. "That's what Vertex's legal team said, but it's still a risk." Just then, Jason's phone buzzed again. He checked it, his expression darkening. "Dan's calling an emergency meeting tomorrow morning, Saturday. He's never done that before." "The Wilson account review is due Monday," Veronica explained, her voice tense. "Nobody can find your analysis files." I smiled slightly, a mix of anticipation and resolve swelling within me. The storm was brewing, and I was ready to face it head-on. Over the weekend, my phone buzzed constantly with updates from my former team. An emergency Saturday meeting had unfolded, tension hanging thick in the air. Dan had been relentless, pressuring everyone to take on my responsibilities without so much as a hint of extra pay. They'd found the Wilson account files, but comprehension of my analysis methodology was slipping through their fingers like grains of sand. By Sunday evening, I'd made a decision that sent a surge of hope through me. Monday morning, I dialed Hank Fleming. "I accept your offer," I declared, my voice steady. "But I have one condition." "Name it," Hank replied, curiosity piqued. "If my former colleagues from AmeriCorps apply to Vertex, I want them to be given fair consideration." "Absolutely," he assured me. "If they're even half as talented as you, we'd be lucky to have them." That afternoon, I signed my contract as the Division Director of Pacific Northwest Operations. The salary, an astounding 40% increase with better benefits and a sign-on bonus. As I stepped out of Vertex's offices, my heart raced at the sight of 7 new messages lighting up my phone, each one from a member of my old team wanting to meet for coffee. Tuesday morning found me nestled in a quiet corner of a downtown cafe, anticipation buzzing in the air. First came Jason, followed closely by Veronica. One by one, Ethan, Louise, Diane, Gabriella, and Kayla filled the tables we pulled together. Conversations flowed, and I could feel the frustration radiating off them as they shared stories of chaos. "Summit Edge is imploding," Ethan said, his voice low but urgent. "Dan's micromanaging everyone. Paul is breathing down his neck, and clients are starting to panic." The mention of the Wilson account sent a chill through me. "They want to know why you aren't handling their renewal," Veronica chimed in. I sipped my coffee, absorbing their frustration, their worries. I could almost taste the rain-dampened leaves outside, the scent of fresh beginnings lingering in the air. "We heard you accepted a position at Vertex," Jason finally said, breaking the charged silence. All eyes turned to me, waiting. "News travels fast," I noted, a slight smile on my lips. "We want to come with you," Veronica said firmly, the determination echoing in her voice. Nods of agreement rippled through the group. I studied their anxious faces, feeling the weight of my decision. Could I really lead them into this new chapter? More than just a job, this was about standing up against the corporate indifference that had hurt us all. In that moment, wrapped in the warmth of their trust, I felt the chill of autumn air sharpen my resolve. Perhaps we could turn the tides together, defying the very systems that sought to break us. Would we reclaim our dignity in this corporate landscape or merely become another casualty? Only time would tell. "You all hold secure jobs at Summit Edge. Are you sure you want to risk that?" "What security?" Lou shot back, bitterness dripping from her voice. "If they'd fire you for attending your father's funeral, none of us are safe." "Vertex is hiring," I said slowly, weighing my words. "I can't promise anything, but I can refer you. You'd need to apply formally." But one look around the table, I knew I was already losing them. "We already have," Gabriella chimed in. She pulled out a printed confirmation emails. "All 7 of us yesterday." I stared, stunned. You applied before talking to me. We trust you, Kayla said simply. Where you go, we go. A powerful swell of emotion crashed over me. Gratitude mingled with vindication. Let me make some calls. Then came Monday morning. My phone rang at 7:30. The name on the screen sent an icy shiver down my spine. Paula McCormick, Summit Edge's regional manager. Holly, she began, her voice a calm veneer masking something more volatile. We need to talk. Good morning, Paula, I replied, keeping my tone as neutral as I could manage. What can I do for you? I've just received 7 resignation letters, all from your former team. Effective immediately. A heavy pause lingered between us. Care to explain? I took a measured breath, gathering my thoughts. I'm not sure what explanation you're looking for. I don't work for Summit Edge anymore. They're all going to Vertex, where I just started as division director. Her voice chilled, laced with accusation. This doesn't look coincidental. People make career choices for all sorts of reasons, Paula, I replied, my heart steadying in defiance. Perhaps you should ask Dan why your top-performing team is leaving en masse. This is about your termination, isn't it? She said, resignation now creeping into her tone. I've reviewed the situation. Dan didn't consult me before letting you go. I would never have approved it. That struck me. I thought of the autumn morning at AmeriCorps, the bitter scent of coffee filling the air while my father's voice echoed warmly in my memory, just moments before I'd received that impersonal HR email. I inhaled deeply. That's between you and Dan. Though I'm curious why Summit Edge's regional manager wasn't involved in the termination of a district operations manager. Paula sighed, frustration crackling in the silence, that uncomfortable pause stretching between us. Look, Holly, she finally broke the quiet. Each word was a step back to the realities of my grief, the sharp cuts of corporate dynamics making the air around me thick with unresolved tension. Did I dare to reclaim dignity in the face of indifference? The journey ahead felt daunting, yet strangely invigorating. The atmosphere shifted as Margaret Riley entered AmeriCorps Distribution's lobby. The usual click and hum of activity felt thick and heavy today. Sunlight threw stark patterns across the polished floor, and Hank, her old ally, leaned in close, his face tight with worry. There's been a change, he murmured, pressing a document into her palm. Margaret stared down, her breath hitching. Charles Brennan's termination letter, dated yesterday. Margaret's heartbeat quickened. This was the man who had dismissed her with a cold efficiency, just as she was grappling with the aftermath of her father's death. Suddenly, the weight of loss transformed into her weapon. Could she finally reclaim the dignity that had been taken from her? Within hours, she found herself in a heated conversation with Paula McCormick, the regional manager who had overseen that betrayal. Despite the tension shadowing their exchange, Margaret stood firm. You want my expertise back? How about a 10% raise on top of an apology? Paula's desperation was palpable. Losing 7 top performers was no small issue. Yet, for Margaret, it wasn't just the money. It was about something deeper, her worth, her values. Then, what would it take? Paula asked, her voice trembling under the strain of corporate reality. It would take a time machine, Margaret replied sharply, to go back to when I lost my father and you showed a shred of decency. The silence that followed hung heavy, filled with unacknowledged grief that stretched between them. I need to go, Paula. I start at Vertex today. Margaret's resolve intensified. Her dream was rising from the ashes of corporate indifference. As she drove to her new role, she felt a thrill of hope. Hank welcomed her, a wide grin on his face. We're bringing in all 7 of your former colleagues. Their potential is extraordinary. Days later, another call came in. This one from Barbara Kent in Personnel Department. Margaret, you need to know, Dan's on administrative leave. An investigation is underway about how bereavement was handled. Her heart swelled with vindication. The corporate indifference that had tried to bury her was now unearthing the truth. By the week's end, every member of her former team had accepted offers with Vertex, and they gathered for dinner to celebrate their unity. With glasses raised, they toasted not just to new beginnings, but to resilience in the face of adversity. Margaret's journey had transformed her grief into strength, and together, they would step into a future filled with promise. "To new beginnings," Veronica said, raising her glass. "And to Holly," Jason added, his voice filled with admiration. "You taught us what real leadership looks like." The following week, a letter arrived from AmeriCorps Distribution. It acknowledged my wrongful termination and offered a settlement to avoid litigation. I accepted it, not for the money, but for the validation. They had been wrong. That same day, the Wilson account signed with Vertex, bringing their business to us after learning that their preferred team now worked under my direction. The river had moved, but we had remained steady like rocks, just as my father had taught me. 3 months later, I stood at the front of Vertex's largest conference room, presenting our quarterly results to the executive team. The numbers spoke for themselves. 30% growth in our division, 4 major client acquisitions, 3 of them former AmeriCorps accounts, and operational efficiency improvements that had reduced costs by 22%. "Exceptional work, Holly," Hank said, his eyes shining with pride. "You and your team have exceeded every projection." I smiled, feeling a swell of gratitude. "My team deserves the credit. They've been remarkable." After the meeting, I returned to my community center to find my 7 core team members waiting with a cake. "What's this for?" I asked, surprised. "It's been exactly 3 months since we all jumped ship together," Jason explained, grinning. "We're celebrating our Independence Day." I laughed, feeling a warmth spread through me. "You're all ridiculous." "Seriously, Holly," Veronica chimed in, "everyone's thriving here." It was true. Each team member had grown professionally in their new roles at Vertex. They had more autonomy, better resources, and were finally receiving recognition for their contributions. Most importantly, they were valued as people, not just productivity machines. Just then, my phone buzzed with a news alert. AmeriCorps Distribution announces restructuring amid client exodus. I showed it to the group, and the room fell silent. "I heard they lost the Hernandez contract last week," Ethan said, slicing the cake. "That's 20% of their Pacific Northwest revenue." The tension in the air was palpable. Would AmeriCorps' downfall be the final chapter in their story? Or was this just the beginning of a new battle? "Dan's gone," Luis added. "Cleared out his community center Friday. Paul is trying to save what's left, but I felt no pleasure in Summit Edge's struggles, only a sense of justice. The company wasn't failing because we had left. It was failing because its leadership had created a culture where employees were disposable, where attending a father's funeral was considered a lack of commitment." To Summit Edge, I raised my water glass. May they learn that a company is only as strong as how they treat their people. And to Holly, Gabriella added, who showed us we deserved better. 6 months after joining Vertex, I received an unexpected lunch invitation from Paula McCormick. She'd left Summit Edge and joined a management consulting firm specializing in organizational culture. We met at a quiet restaurant overlooking the Minneapolis River. Paula looked different, more relaxed. The perpetual stress lines around her eyes softened. "Thank you for meeting me," she began. "I wanted to apologize properly for what happened. You weren't directly responsible," I reminded her. "No, but I created the environment that made it possible." She sighed. "After you and your team left, everything unraveled. The board brought in external consultants to evaluate what went wrong. The report wasn't flattering to any of us in leadership." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "Summit Edge is being acquired by Meridian Shipping," Paula revealed, "at a fraction of its previous valuation. They're basically buying the client list and physical assets." The news didn't surprise me. Summit Edge had been hemorrhaging clients and talent for months. "What about Dan?" I asked, still unemployed last I heard. His reputation in the industry. She trailed off. Let's just say your story has circulated widely. I hadn't spread the details of my termination, but I hadn't hidden them either. When asked why I'd left Summit Edge, I told the simple truth. I've learned a valuable lesson from all this, Paula continued. Now I'm helping other companies avoid the same mistakes. As we finished lunch, Paula asked the question I sensed had been on her mind all along. Was it worth it, walking away quietly instead of fighting? I thought about my team at Vertex, thriving, motivated, and treated with respect. I thought about the clients who had followed us, who now received better service. I thought about my father, who had taught me that sometimes the strongest response isn't the loudest. Yes, I replied simply, the results speak for themselves. 1 year after that fateful email that had changed the course of my career, Vertex named me Executive Vice President of Operations for the entire Northwest region. My division had become the company's crown jewel, efficient, innovative, and boasting the highest employee satisfaction scores in the organization. Each of my 7 team members had been promoted as well. Jason now led his own division. Veronica had transformed our client relations approach and earned recognition throughout the industry. The others had similarly distinguished themselves, their talents finally receiving the appreciation they deserved. On the anniversary of my termination from Summit Edge, I received a small package in the mail. Inside was my old cactus plant, now slightly larger but still thriving, with a note from Barbara Kent. Rescued this from your desk. Thought you might want it back now. Summit Edge closes for good next week. I placed the cactus on my windowsill where it would get plenty of sunlight. Like me, it had survived being discarded and found a better place to grow. That evening, I drove to the Minneapolis River and stood on the bank where my father and I used to fish. The water flowed steadily around the rocks, just as it always had. I thought about how a single moment, a cold email terminating my employment, had ultimately led to greater success and happiness, not just for me, but for everyone who had followed me. The sunset cast a golden glow on the water, wrapping Margaret in a blanket of memories and release. Each tear she shed tasted of profound loss: her father, her career, her former self. Yet, amid the sadness, her chest lifted with a vitality she thought lost forever. Across that river, the cold corporate world she had outgrown felt small, almost washed away. As Margaret gripped the railing, a purpose pulsed through her fingers, urging her to rebuild what truly mattered. She closed her eyes, breathing in the rich scent of rain-soaked earth. The gentle rustle of leaves made her heart ache with possibilities. Suddenly came the realization. Her journey wasn't about revenge against the system that failed her. No, it was about creating a sanctuary where empathy reigned, a place where bereavement leave spoke of strength, not weakness, where dignity overshadowed mere productivity. Margaret chuckled softly at the thought of the old guard crumbling. Her father would have stood by her, pride shining in his eyes. With clarity dawning, she recognized that the hardest moments had paved the way to the most meaningful transformations. After all, staying steady like the rocks while the river of change flows, that's how you find your true power.